Welcome to Mind Meets Body and Soul, a podcast that connects the dots between clinical mental health and spiritual holistic wellness. I'm Heather, a licensed clinical social worker and mental health guru.
And I'm Devon, a Reiki master, spiritual teacher, and lover of all things woo-woo. We're here to discuss various wellness topics, highlighting the connection between the mind, body, and soul.
We'll be offering nuggets of wisdom from each of our fields with the ultimate goal of bridging the gap between our two worlds. Whether you lean more into cognitive psychology
or flow with the woo-woo waters, our intention is to help you prioritize yourself and unlock a fresh perspective to healing, growth, and expansion. We're so excited you're here. Let's jump in.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Mind Meets Body and Soul, episode 45. Heather here with my lovely co-host, Devon. How you doing?
Hi, Heather. I am doing well. It is pretty crazy to think that we are at episode 45, almost at our, what do they call it? Like golden 50? Is that a thing?
I don't know, maybe.
I don't know. Isn't it like the golden birthday is your 50th or?
I think your golden birthday is like when you turn the age that your birthday is. Like, so I'm July 1st, so my golden birthday was my first birthday. Like if you are turning 27 and your birthday's on the 27th, like the 27 is your golden birthday. I thought, but I could be totally wrong.
We're making our own rules here. And so episode number 50 will be our golden episode. Mm-hmm. And we are currently at 45, so we're making our way.
It feels like such a mature number, 45. Like it just feels so like established that we're here. I don't know.
It does. I know I had messaged you yesterday, I guess it was, and we were giggling over just like the times when we started this podcast, not even a year ago, and we were like so hell-bent on making sure we had the right equipment, and we were worried about like echo, like do we have to buy some like padded things for our walls, and like we were like piling up like towels around the microphone. And oh my gosh, so much went into this podcasting process. And now we're just like, we have a date on the calendar, a time, we hop on, we press record, experience some tech issues here and there. And then that's it. We edit, we process, we share.
It is so fun. And I loved you taking that moment to like cherish where we are. Like I do think we put so much into this, and I had kind of taken for granted that I can just go into the office, work a whole day, come here, jump on this call, record a podcast. Like it's just, I don't lose sight of it when I'm driving to work and I'm listening to the episode that comes out that week and I see our little faces on my like car screen because I'm listening to it and I'm like, oh my gosh, like we have a podcast, and it is fun to like relish in these moments.
It is really cool. And it's always a helpful reminder for truly anybody, especially us being these entrepreneurs, like business owners. It's so easy to just continually be climbing up that mountain and to not look back and be like, oh my gosh, look at that view. Look how far I've come, how many maybe obstacles I've had to overcome and go through. So just always a reminder to take a moment to look around you, to bring in that appreciation, that celebration and gratitude for you, for all that you've accomplished.
Yeah.
Easier said than done, but we always need that reminder.
Yeah, it's definitely a good reminder. So I'm glad that we had that moment and that we shared that space, and we always share this space.
Yeah. And as we are starting off this episode, I know I've given you a little preview of what it is that we're going to be talking about. I have a really big like truth bomb that I haven't shared with you that I just wanted to bring to this podcast so that I could A, see your reaction, and two, so we could make a podcast episode around it. So are you ready for my truth bomb?
I'm nervous, but I'm ready.
All right. Well, it's nothing bad. It's more just like a what really type reaction that I know will lead, as it always does, into a great conversation. So I'm going to bring you back to the jungle because this is where this experience happened. So it was the second to last day in the jungle, having had all of these beautiful healing and connecting and sharing moments with others, with myself. And we had something called a dynamic meditation. not going to get too much into it. It's not really relevant here, but it was just a really, really cool, immersive, intense meditation process. And after that meditation is when I experienced like the greatest peace and some really just profound truths coming up. And I leave that meditation space and I'm walking back to my bungalow after the meditation, and a thought pops up in my head. A thought that comes up, like a little voice that comes up for the very first time. I hear in my head, maybe I'm not moving to Boulder.
Oh my gosh, I guess I can't be quiet because we're like recording a podcast, but I don't have words.
I know.
What is it like? What do you make of that?
Well, it's the same voice and the same like random thought that popped up in my head as December of 2021,
Hmm.
when for the first time I heard in my head, maybe I'm leaving teaching. And in a way, it was surprising because I had never heard that before in my head. There was something that also kind of rang true about it. So when I heard that back in December, I was like, completely thrown off, but yet also it felt something about it felt true and felt right. And this time, walking back to my bungalow and hearing that in my head, maybe I'm not moving to Boulder, there was a lot of sadness that came with it because it's like, what?
Right.
For any of my friends, family, people listening on this podcast, like I have been gung ho, Boulder, Colorado. I am moving to Boulder for almost the past 2 years now.
The whole time I've known you, that's been like an on the radar thing. Like I always remember being like, we have to plan this workshop with her now because she might not be here.
Yeah. So, yeah, truth bomb drop. We're going to get into it and also introduce this very prevalent topic for me. And I know for many as we are on this spiritual journey, and that is the topic of non attachment.
Yeah. So that was, I have never heard that before. So talk to us about what that means.
Yeah. So, getting into the topic of non attachment, and then we'll circle back to the story. What I had
Yeah.
sent you about non attachment, without telling you what it is that we were going to be talking about. I actually read about non-attachment a lot in Michael Singer's The Untethered Soul, but I
Mhm.
know that it is also a Buddhist philosophy, and it emphasizes the importance of letting go of attachment to material possessions, relationships, thoughts, and emotions, ultimately to cultivate inner peace and contentment. Okay. So we're going to be talking about a big dose of surrender, trust, some grieving in this process, of course, as we love to do in like every single episode for some reason. And what I would love to also share, coming from a personal standpoint, from the clients that I work with, and just what I find to be true about like navigating this spiritual journey, is that this practice of non attachment is essential so that we aren't living so tethered by our ego and by the stories that we've taken on or told ourselves, by our expectations and society standards. And I think it probably actually ties in with the my word for this year of infinite being, and not feeling bogged down or tied down to any one thing. And it's like, well, of course, I have this realization that maybe I'm not moving to the place that I've been so committed to and attached to for the past 2 years.
It is so wild that we do talk so much about grief, but I do think you have to hold space to feel that. Like, and even I love this idea of non attachment and not feeling tethered to a particular thing. But I think our human self does attach itself a little bit, or we get our hopes up, or we feel excited. And whenever we have those moments, there is going to be a loss that's associated with that. And we've talked before about inside out and how like the core memories become like two colors. So, this, when you the beautiful thing about having hopes and joy and dreams is the yellow exciting stuff, but when we lose that or we disconnect from that or reality hits sometimes and it's not aligned, then we do have to experience that sadness and that grief.
Of course. Yeah. And through this conversation, as we get more into it too, like I want to emphasize that practicing non attachment isn't, I don't give a F about
Mm.
anything, anyone. Like it's not losing the emotional piece to it. It's just like loosening our grip, right? And loosening our expectation that it has to look, feel, be a certain way to indicate some kind of success or achievement or, level of happiness. And it's something that I think you and I probably often speak to. We just aren't, we maybe you haven't been calling it non-attachment. But it's something that I do speak to with my clients. And then now I'm getting like a big dose of my own medicine, it feels like.
Would you be able to or mind explaining like what this looked like then for
Yeah.
you in this situation?
Yeah. Thank you. So upon hearing that voice in my head that was like, maybe I'm not moving to Boulder, it was pretty shocking. It was also somewhat upsetting. And I remember one of my friends that I had made there, we were talking about that meditation, and I shared with her what came up in my head. And she didn't know me beyond those days that we'd been there in the jungle, but it was really helpful to talk to somebody who was like, a new friend of mine. And she kind of through our conversation was like, well, maybe it's not Boulder, maybe it's somewhere else, maybe it's somewhere similar. And she helped me kind of get curious about what that meant for me. And maybe it's not right now, but maybe it's still happening at some point. And then interestingly enough, the day after that, the day that we were leaving, like truly an hour before we were leaving, I sat down in conversation with um, one of my other friends that I had made and found out that she was from Colorado. Of course, the one person at the retreat from Colorado is there. I'm sitting down having a conversation with her. She lives a little bit more outside of the Denver area, but not too far. And this is exactly what you were talking to too when it comes to the emotions and stuff. I started sharing this with her and I started crying. Just full on broke down, crying because this was the first time I really allowed myself to consider that I wasn't going to be moving to Boulder, and I had been attached so much to it with like deep knowing that it was a place that I wanted to be. It was a place where I felt good. The mountains have been calling me for forever. Colorado has been calling me for forever.
It's reminding me so much of the conversation that we had about manifesting and the process of manifestation. And you're not trying to manifest the car. We aren't in theory supposed to be trying to manifest like this specific thing, rather like zooming out and seeing like the feelings or like the why behind what it is that you want. So it's so hard for me to see you have to go through this and also have to go through this again because you also went through this once before with the Boulder stuff. So, like, it makes me so sad that you have to feel all of this, but like, somebody somewhere really doesn't want you there now. Like it fell through with the lease of that apartment and you went through the emotions then. And even now, still, it sounds harsh and it feels harsh to say, but like it was the universe spirit's way of like severing that for now. Like it doesn't have to be a permanent thing, but they were like, hello, she didn't get the hint with the lease. So like she's really got to, figure it out that this isn't it right now.
Yeah, it's like if I didn't get the message, which I didn't back in October, I knew that there was some kind of redirection, but I didn't think that it was like, nope, not Boulder happening anytime in the near future. Then this was the most clear one of like, you need to let go of Boulder, at least for now. And when that drawbridge does come back down and the fog clears, like when I was able to come back to New Jersey after the retreat and sit with these thoughts that I had and consider like, okay, well, maybe I'm not going. Honestly, in ways, it has started to come together for me because it could have gone one of two ways, right? Like I could have heard that, and this is sometimes what we often do. I could have had that intuitive hit or that intuitive hunch, like, oh, maybe I'm not going. And I could have been like, you know what? No, I'm going, like Kool-Aid man punching
Mhm.
through the wall, like forcing my way to Boulder to make it happen. Or we can choose in that moment to let go, to surrender, and to get curious. Okay, why? Right? Like we love the toddler question. Why, maybe? And to be honest, sometimes we don't always get an answer to the why, at least not in the immediate turn. It's now been almost a month since the retreat, and it's starting to make sense when I think about it. Like this year alone in 2024, I realized that I have 12 weddings across 2 countries, across 8 different states, and I have another international trip coming up. And so maybe I'm not planting roots down in Boulder, Colorado at this point in my life. Who knows? I don't know. Maybe this is meant to be a year of travel for me. Maybe this is meant to be a year of like focusing on expanding my business and then rooting myself down like when I'm ready to be in one place. Because right now, maybe I'm actually not ready to be in one place. And I say maybe because these aren't definites. And I realized over the past year that I've had to get really comfortable with being in the unknown, maybe for the past 2 years since I started my business. And I know it's a very uncomfy place for us to be in to embrace the unknown. But, and this is what we're talking about in this conversation here, if we can adapt a practice of non-attachment in the ways that feels safe, comfortable for us, then I think we can allow life to unfold for us in ways that are greater than we can imagine. And so here I am embracing the uncomfy non-attachment to where it is that I'm going.
It is so uncomfy. I think that's like the perfect way to describe it, and it feels unsettling when we don't have true control of the things that are happening around us, but we can remember that we can control, or we have to remember what we can control, which is our thoughts and where we like how we react and how we respond to these things. And even you saying like the why, we love the toddler question of why, but even that, I think we have a tendency to attach to needing closure, and we don't always get closure. Like that's
Yeah.
another like hard reality of life and adulthood and being a human, is that like as much as we love closure, we don't always get it either. We don't always get the answer to those why questions. So even still, you're now having to take this non-attachment a step further. Like not only do you have to non-attach to the idea of living in the mountains and Boulder and all of that, but then it's also not attaching to the why for that. Like, and just trusting that things are unfolding as they are meant to. And we don't always have the pleasure of knowing why that is the way that it is.
Yeah. And even as you're explaining it, it's such an unsettling truth that like we're not always going to have an answer because I would love to know, like, okay, why am I not going to Boulder? Where am I going? When am I
Mhm.
going? If I am going to Boulder, when am I going? Like I even talking to you and speaking to our audience about practicing non-attachment, like I'm not coming from a place of having mastered non-attachment by any means. I'm working through it, but I'm sharing my process as I do because I know that this is very real for so many. Before this podcast episode, coincidentally enough, I just came from a lunch with some of my girlfriends, and I was sharing with them the same news of like, guys, I had this thought in my head, maybe I'm not going to Boulder. And of course, they're very happy because then that means that I'm going to be here with them. But it really led to a helpful adult conversation of like, yeah, this is what life is like sometimes. We can only plan and plot so much. And for someone like myself that really does like believe that things are, that there's a greater plan, there's a greater like force at play here. And then that brings in your favorite, or at least my favorite of yours, therapyism of zooming out.
Yeah. I was thinking that too, that like in some way we have to figure out how to let go, how to surrender, how to accept the fact that like I don't actually have control of all the things. And I don't know why I love the show Friends. And the quote that's like coming to mind is when Monica says to Rachel, like, welcome to adulthood. It sucks. You're going to love it. Like that's kind of where a lot of us are. And I say to people in therapy all the time that like the hard truth or the shitty part about being an adult is that like we actually don't have all the control and can't do all the things, and it's a lot of like coming to terms with things or choosing the lesser of the evil options because it's not as clear or pretty or clean or comfy as we thought that it was going to be.
Right. Yeah. I love that quote. That's a good one. And yeah, I know that we've had these conversations already, like in past episodes, probably because, we had the conversation of when Boulder didn't work out the first time. And so this conversation kind of adds to that. But the reason for this conversation and the reason why the topic of non attachment, again, like we always talk about what this adopting this belief or this perspective or this approach can do for you. And what I see to be a helpful benefit of practicing non attachment is like almost not setting yourself up for disappointment almost. Like my friends were saying, it was like you've heard of the phrase of like don't have high expectations or don't have expectations at all because then you don't allow yourself to get disappointed, something like that. And like yes, and also you can have a vision or a goal for yourself of like what you want. You're very much entitled to what you want. And I know that there's a truth in like the things that we want are the things that are meant for us in one way or another. And I feel like this is very similar to other conversations that we've had in the past because it is. We talked about, what happened the first time when the bold release fell through. And the reason why I want to bring up specifically this topic and this perspective of, non attachment is because we love like sharing what the benefit of that is for somebody.
I mean, it's something we've said over and over before, but I think we have to start by like sitting in the grief and the sadness and not sitting in it just one time because I feel like it's going to continue to come up, but like allowing it to come up and grieving what we had wanted or the expectation, or maybe that's where we find our why. Like, okay, you not in a judgmental way, but like, why is this so upsetting to you? Like, what about this situation is causing you so much pain and agony and sadness? And like, let's unpack that and sit in that space a little bit so that we can then better understand why this thing matters to you so much and how we can zoom out and like still access or still get it to some capacity. I think a lot about like you're very much in the gray area with this. And I think the human side of us, our ego, we like things like all or nothing, very like black and white. And I think when people initially think about the gray, they're like, okay, well, it's 50% black, 50% white. And like the actual reality is that like if it's all or nothing, black or white, 0 or 100, there's 99 other things in the middle that it can be. So the gray area can sometimes be more emotional. Like maybe we're pretty emotional, but we can still have some logic. Maybe we're pretty logical and we can start planning and doing things and rationalizing. And then sometimes we're just in the middle, but we're always, I think, trying to hold space for both to some capacity, even if it doesn't feel like I'm 50% emotional, 50% logical. Like we're just trying to carve out that space so that all things can exist to some extent. I have the emotions, I have the feelings because I'm a spiritual human being, but I also have the logic and the thoughts because, like, that helps me accomplish things.
Yeah, that's me here in the gray area. And it can be really unsettling at times. It can be really frustrating. And so we absolutely hold space for and acknowledge that part of us. And also, there can be that excitement and that joy and that gratitude for where we are.
It's making me think a lot too. Like another tip or another tool that I'd offer is I'm thinking of the mug that you got me that says be here now. Like I think another tip and tool is like to reel yourself back into like the present moment. And I'm just picturing like being in a river and instead of like trying to swim upstream, like surrendering is just like leaning back and like floating. And like you can only do so much here in this moment regardless. So instead of worrying so much or trying to be so future focused, I think if we can reel ourselves in and gently remind ourselves, like, we're here. Like, I'm going to be here in this moment instead of like living and investing so much into the future. Like, of course, we have to plan and we have to like be thoughtful and goal oriented to some capacity, but we also live only in this moment. So, like, I do think, again, two things can exist at once, right? Like, yes, have the goals and want the things, but live here, don't live there. And I think that reeling yourself in and that like present focused awareness, mindfulness of here is also like an important strategy in all of this.
And it reminds me about what Michael Singer writes in his book, The Untethered Soul, of like how when we are in that present moment, when we're living in a place of non-attachment, we become the observer of life happening around us. And we don't find ourselves in that heightened emotional state or needing to control and hold on to things so tightly.
Hmm. My grandma told me years ago, she said, watch it like a movie and don't be as invested in it. Like if you are so emotionally attached to things, we then are like knocked over by it, swept away by it, yanked around. Whereas if we zoom out and we're like the active observer, I do think we're able to see it or respond to it differently. So, again, like all of these things that maybe I'm offering today feel a little bit loftier, or I feel like they're a little loftier. Come up with some affirmations for yourself. And I would suggest, like, okay, you put that in your brain. It's a movie. I'm going to watch it like a movie. Or I sometimes will picture like a Buzz Lightyear helmet. Like, nope, I'm going to close off and like not attach to this and come up with a creative affirmation, silly tool way to remind yourself that you have a choice to zoom out. You have a choice to not attach to something or unattach after you've attached.
Yeah, that's a great tool. And I'll add in there too, like the very helpful body piece of like, okay, yep, you want to commit to that mentally. Let's get your body on board with that as well. And that can look like any of the nervous system regulation tools that we've offered across this podcast, reaching out to those that, hello, energy workers that help with that energetic piece and that emotional piece that then gets your body on board with where you're trying to take it. So, yeah, big dose of surrender, of non attachment, of trust here. I don't know where I'm going to be in a month, 3 months, 5 months, a year from now, and just taking you all along on the journey with me. So thank you, Heather, as always, for holding space for my shares and for sharing these conversations with me. I hope, if anything, that this share feels relatable to our audience and that, it's permission to embrace, as we've mentioned before, the ebbs and flows, the twists and turns, and to come to a place of radical acceptance and trust that we're headed in a direction that is for our highest good.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry that this is happening to you. I appreciate that you brought it in here. Like we said a couple episodes ago, like find the people that feel safe to, work through this with. Like I'll get in that uncomfy space with you. I'll come sit with you while you're in it. It sucks. It's not something I want for you, but you don't have to do it alone. There are people that are here, and just find them and invite them in, and you can be uncomfy together.
I love that. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you, Devon, for bringing this conversation in. I related to it, so I'm hopeful that, like you said, our audience members will too. Is it your turn this week to look up? It feels like good
Yeah,
for you.
I can. I've actually been looking at something very specific on my business vision board, and it says, change your attitude, change your future.
Hmm.
So, as we are talking about non attachment, like change your attitude sounds like embrace some non attachment, let go of the grip that you've had, and you'll change your future. You will change the path that you're heading down. It's like, as you said, like turn on your back and just kind of float down the river.
Yeah, we're floating. We're here, be here, float, and we'll see where that gets us.
Exactly. So, thank you as always for a great conversation, Heather. Look forward to all the ones to come, and we will see you all again next week.
Thanks, Devon. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
We are so glad that you took the time to share this space with us. We'll be releasing new episodes of Mind Meets Body and Soul every Tuesday, so be sure to give us a follow and share this podcast with those you love.
To connect with us and join our communities, head to the show notes where you'll find our contact information and individual websites. Until next week, stay grounded, keep growing, and trust that everything you seek is unfolding for you.